Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for dialing into this webinar. This is a session entitled A Few of Our Favourite Things. Essentially, we're going to look at what's new in FME 2014. My name's David Eagle. I work for One Spatial, and I'm a certified FME professional and trainer. So I'm going to take you through the session. To begin with, we're going to have a very brief look at what FME is. I've looked at some of the people registered for this session, and largely I'm aware that most of you are already existing users of FME. And whilst this session is directed largely towards people like you, people who've used FME for some time, there will be plenty for you to get out of this if you're a relatively new user or are thinking about purchasing FME for some of your dealing with some of your data challenges. What I'll do is initially focus on a few of the resources that are available around the FME 2014 release. But largely the focus is going to be around what capabilities have appeared in this release that are really making a difference already to ourselves as FME consultants and some of the customers that we've had feedback from in the last month or so. Who've been either involved in the beta program or have had access to 2014 right from the off in January. So I'll look at some of the changes around formats, transformers, and also infrastructure and documentation. So quite a bit to cover in the next hour. As resellers for over 10 years, One Spatial are a platinum partner. And we can provide services around the FME product lines, whether that's whether you need licenses or whether you need support or consultancy services. We have regular public training courses in our classroom in Cambridge that will come to you as well. And we make the point really that proven experience really matters to us. And that's why we've put so many of our staff through Safe Software's certification program. So we've got 6 certified professionals and 4 certified trainers globally to assist with your FME needs. I mentioned that I'd talk about FME and what it does. Well, it's an ETL tool. Some of you may have heard that term before: extract, transform, and load. It allows you to take data out of one data repository, do something to it, whether that's manipulating the content or the schema, and write it to a target. FME supports over 300 formats, so it can read from tab and write to shape, read from shape and write to DWG, and work with multiple formats in different environments, allowing you to get the most out of your data. If you want to easily go and find out what formats are supported or whether the formats you care about are supported in FME, then just dive along to safe.com/formats, and you can have a look at the main formats that are available, whether that's flat files or databases. Safe have had a good conversation going with most major vendors for a very long time, really. So I've worked closely with database vendors like Oracle and Microsoft. They've worked in the open source arena with some of the open source formats. GIS and CAD, Esri and Autodesk and MicroStation, and then some of the web services that are increasingly taking over our life in some cases, but are also providing some very useful input to our workflows, are also covered by FME in many ways, whether that's through readers and writers or transformers or connected web services like Zapier. The applications that you get with FME Desktop, the main event really is FME Workbench. It's where you carry out and create your FME processes. But you generally want to have a look at your data, so the data inspector is useful for that. Being able to carry out quick translations and run other people's processes is pretty useful, and that's possible using a tool called the Quick Translator. There are some plug-in SDKs available that allow you to build your own applications with FME under the bonnet. And of course, if you hadn't realized, if you have another application on your machine, you can inject your FME license across into those utilities to give those applications FME's format reach and more in some cases. So that's using the application extender capability in FME. Exchanging data between formats and environments is really what FME is all about. Spatial, non-spatial data, 2D, 3D, database, flat files, web services, solving the age-old GIS to CAD, CAD to GIS problem is what FME does best. It's an interoperability tool at the end of the day. But as I mentioned right at the start, this is going to be all about what's new in 2014, so that's where my focus is going to be from now on. But really just to highlight, I'm not going to try and repeat too much things that have been said already. The point of a reseller like ourselves is to try and add value to what SAFE are out there doing already. So there are a number of resources you can go to. If we have a look at the launch webinar, these resources, SAFE do a really good job of promoting their new releases, and there are a huge amount of different media related resources out there. So over on their site you can have access to the unveiling of FME 2014 and what they went and said about it. There's also a subsequent webinar that goes one step further. It's what they call a deep dive, going into some of the more technical capabilities of the new release. So a very useful place to go. Annually they release a blog document that tells you a little bit about the individual capabilities of the new release. So if you go back onto FMEpedia, which is one of the main resources, you can go and see what was new in 2013, 12 and 11. I think you can go back at least 4 years on that site. But somewhere I would urge you to go and register with picking up an RSS feed or checking back regularly is the Evangelist blog. This is a guy called Mark Island who writes documentation and training, but also does an extremely useful blog. In this year, he's gone through a bunch of top 10s. So he's looked at workbench optimizations. He's looked at the top 10 transformer changes and the top 10 format changes, all available on SAFE's blog. So really useful resources to go and take a look at. SAFE focus on the headlines in their sessions, and whilst headlines are always really interesting, bizarre in some cases, the headline capabilities are that, well, I mean, there's over 20 new formats supported in FME. SAFE don't go out to try and support new formats, but there's new products and new hardware that pops up all the time. So they like to make sure that they have the breadth of coverage of that format support. So, for example, Autodesk Revit can be read now directly. There's also an Inspire GML writer that partners with the Inspire reader that came along in FME 2013. There's a lot of changes to existing formats, far too many to list really, but things like the Esri File Geodatabase API, the free API that was released in 2012 to allow you to work with geodatabases without an Esri license. Well, that's been upgraded to version 1.3. If you work with photographs or imagery quite a lot, formats like JPEG have these things called EXIF attributes. These are essentially metadata attributes that store information about the image. So smartphones that take photographs store EXIF information, which are latitude and longitude. You can then position those in the right place. A whole raft of new EXIF attributes are now available, like saturation and color values. There are lots of new transformers for carrying out different tasks. For example, there's 8 new ones just for working with point clouds. Another headline is that you can use Workbench on Linux and Mac OS X now if you want. So those technology preview installers are now available for you to download. One of the things we've seen a big change in and are pleased about is also the user interface revamp that's happened. but more on that a little later in this session. So as I say, the focus for us really is to try and dig into some of the detail of these changes. If you go to the safe.com downloads site, you'll see on there that over on the right hand side there's a little button that says what's new in FME Desktop 2014, and if you pop it open you have a very, very, very long text file that contains all the very small changes that have happened. And what we've done is read those and compiled a list of things that we think are important. So really beyond the headlines, where the real power of FME 2014 comes out. And this chap is a genuine Swedish user of FME with his hammer of FME power. Admittedly a little bit of Photoshop going on there to bring Thor into the game, but what we're going to do is focus on a few of our favourite things. So, straight in really, and I'll have demonstrations all being well throughout this session. Any of you that have come across any of my presentations in the past will know that we like to remind people that FME does non-spatial data just as well as it does spatial data, features with geometry. Largely because often your non-spatial data ultimately becomes spatial anyway, through nature of you joining it to something, or perhaps you will generate geometry from the inherent coordinates that are stored in that data. And quite often you might carry out a couple of geometric transformations on your data, but then spend a bit of time manipulating the attribute structure and schema. Now you'll already notice that I'm sort of cheating in this presentation a little bit already, because I'm going to start talking about things that happened in FME 2013. So a little while ago, some new changes came into some of these non-spatial formats. But what we've noticed is that some, particularly government organisations, sometimes struggle to get access to service pack releases of FME. There's a major release in January, and then 4 service packs each year, the first one coming up later on in March for the 2014 release. The thing to note though is because those new things come along in service packs, it's worth keeping your eye out for them, and they sometimes can get missed. So in some cases, people with 2014 now are just spotting some changes that occurred in the service packs recently. So I'm going to focus on the CSV reader to begin with. So if I just fire up an instance of FME Workbench 2014, which is going to come across onto the screen in a second. So there we go. And I'm going to drag in a CSV file. So this is a CSV file called Major Roads, and if I click on the properties, you can see in here that I can choose that it's got field names at the top, which it has. And the thing that happened in Service Pack 1 is that this window, these schema attributes, turned up. So it allows you to set the data type on your CSV for each of your columns, so you know what you're bringing in. And you can see here that as I've got X and Y coordinates, I can actually set an X and Y coordinate data type directly on this feature, which means that I will immediately get geometry out of this workflow, even though I'm reading non-spatial data. The other change that happened is that in FME 2014, so right now these new options here, sorting and filtering, arrived. Sorting and filtering means that that's actually quite a big performance change to the way in which large and very complicated structured CSV files can be managed and handled by FME. And the performance boost that this gives the reader is significant. So you can, for example, filter by a field. So if I wanted to say only go and bring in field names such as road ID where it's equal to, and I've got read roads matching filter or not matching the filter, and if I go and say if you're equal to R19, road 19, and bring that in, it's like sort of essentially applying a where clause on a database. You're saying only go and get what I'm interested in. And by connecting an inspector, the old approach was that I'd got that far and I might have to put in here a vertex creator transformer, previously known as the 2D point replacer. That would be my first step to be able to get geometry connected onto this workflow, but I don't need to do that now. I just run it, and out will pop some geometry directly into the data inspector, and we can see now that in the table view we have all the road 19 geometry already created as points in that workflow. So it's a subtle change, but one that can make a difference to keeping your workspaces tidy and performant on the CSV front. So if we move over and focus our attention a little bit more on a format like the Excel reader and writer that was revamped in Service Pack 2 of 2013, what that gives us is the ability to have much more flexible output in our Excel format. If I open up some data in Notepad, you can see here that essentially we've got a whole bunch of reference values. These are identifiers in a CSV file. If I bring in a little Excel workbench that I've previously written, what we have here, if we just adjust our screen a little bit, is the ability to read in this CSV data, which are these 5 records. And I'm essentially bringing in reference IDs for Natural England sites of special scientific interest. I'm building a URL in here, and it allows me to build the start of the URL, the variable, which is the reference value, and then a constant.pdf, because I want to be able to go and grab PDFs and open them directly off the web. But I'm choosing to write to Excel, and Excel, the new Excel writer, gives me the ability now to embed Excel formulas. So things like this hyperlink formula. The hyperlink formula allows me to define a link location and a friendly name. If you go onto any Excel helping website like exceltips.com, you'll find that out pretty quickly, what the structure is of these formulas. The point is that the trick is that on the writer, if you specify a new attribute name that has an identical name to the one that you want the formula to be referenced to, but then separate it and suffix with a dot formula. So citation dot formula is where the formula, the Excel formula, is going to get written, and that'll get written out into the target. So that's what's happening in here. We're building a concatenated formula where we have the components of the formula comma separated, and then the Excel formula written at the front there. So if I run this, close down my input while that happens, and I've got an Excel file that will open up. We can write out the content, and we can click on a hyperlink, and it will take us, giving us a sensible warning that we might be downloading something we don't want, and we can see now that it directly takes us to the SSI citation directly on the web using that reference. One of the things that happened in this writer, this new writer for Excel, is that you have a lot more control. So, for example, you can style now in Excel, which is new. So you can see I've underlined and turned all those links in blue so that they make sure they look like hyperlinks. But you can specify fill color into Excel as well if you wish. So, useful little additions that happened in 2013, and some changes in 2014 there as well. 2014, you'll find that if you are interested in Oracle as a format, there are a vast number of changes that have happened both on the reader and the writer, in addition to what happened in 2013, but also quite a lot of more forgiving approaches, really. So there's a lot more logging that is defined in the approach to passing in SQL queries to your database. There's a choice now to allow you to specify whether you write attribute names out as upper or lowercase. Flexibility around join key columns in mixed case, as well as the same for table names, and expanded support for basically special characters in table and column names, which were challenging in the past. I have to say, though, one of the biggest changes that makes a difference to myself is the ability to show system tables. It's always been the case that you've been able to get into a system table in Oracle by typing the name of the table that you want to read into the dialog, but it's hidden. It's always hidden. You can't see it and click it to bring it in. Now you can just toggle a switch that says show system tables, and you can read those in directly. If if you want to be able to get at those. So lots of changes on the Oracle front. Format-wise, Inspire has had a good revamp as well. Things like in 2013 there was an Inspire reader, so the ability to read data from the Inspire schema, whatever theme it's in. All of those schema definition files are packaged up and included with FME for you to basically read that data. In 2014, quite a few additional XSD files, schema definition files, are also now shipped with FME for environments and data sets that are being published. So it means that you don't need an internet connection when you're connecting or reading that data because you have the schema definition files stored locally. So an example would be a process from the land registry. If we just go and have a look, the land registry have published Inspire data for their index polygons, so you can go and download those directly and make use of them. So lots and lots and lots of those available for you to get hold of on the land registry's site, and we can consume those directly with FME. So if we dive over to a quick process over in Workbench, I'll prove that to you. I've downloaded a set of index polygons for Cambridge, but you don't need to pre-download the data. You can just connect to the data directly on the web, and my colleague Adrian will be talking about that in a webinar, an Inspire webinar with SAFE next Tuesday. I've just downloaded the data for ease in this exercise, so you can see that I'm connecting directly to the Cambridge zip file in here. So FME can read directly out of the zip file and ingest that data. I'm splitting the geometry out because it includes bounding boxes, and I'm going to write that out into the inspector. The important thing, though, is that in this instance, I'm trying to get my XSD files using the header in the GML, which isn't resolving for one reason or another. But what we can see is that FME already goes and ships a set of schema definition files in a zip file. So that's tucked away there in that schema.zip file that's stored locally. And the Land Registry UK XSD is stored on my machine. That's the case for a number of formats as well. That it means it's pretty handy, and I'll go on to discuss that around the data that we've got from the Ordnance Survey in a few moments. But that process is completed, and it's just refreshing in the inspector over on my other screen, and that'll pop up in a second. It's just quite a lot of features. I'm going to drag that in. There we go. So there you can see a whole bunch of data that's basically come in, and we have the schema defined down at the bottom based on what we want to work with. So zoom in, and you can see that that regenerate. The Inspire Writer is what's new to 2014, and as I said, Inspire is webinars in its own right, really. SAFE have already done one this year called How to Create and Share Inspire Compliant Data with FME. That's available to go and take a look at on their site. It's a very useful session that covers capability around the new approaches to writing out Inspire data and writing out GML, so particularly useful session. And as I mentioned earlier on, the part 2 session is happening next Tuesday on the 11th of March, and you can go and register for that over on SAFE's site. And we're partnering up with SAFE to deliver a story, a use case around working with Inspire data, as are Conterra and Metria, a couple of other resellers of regional resellers of FME. So definitely worth signing up to that session and finding out a little bit more about it. Formats, well, the Ordnance Survey have upgraded now the OS Vector Map District product, so it's come out of beta. VMD is now version 1. FME 2014 now supports that version 1. So If you want to go and work with it, you can go and download a revised set of GML from the Ordnance Survey's website. The shapefiles available too. There have been some significant changes to the version 1 of VMD. For example, it includes a number of different feature codes. Quite a few have been revised, but quite a few are additional. Quite a lot of improved content in there as well, so go and have a look at the technical user guide to find out exactly what's happened. If we actually go and have a look at what I was talking about when it comes to schema files being shipped, you can see that if you've already downloaded your data, your vector map district data, and then you've gone somewhere else offline and you still want to process it, you don't need the schema definition files as supplied by the Ordnance Survey on their URL. You can go direct to the XML location in here. Well, you don't even need to go here. FME does it for you, but I'm just showing you where it is. Here's all the Inspire schema files that are included, so you can open up those. If I right-click and go and open this archive, you can see tucked away in here that we've got the Ordnance Survey, Vector Map District 1 and Beta XML, XSD files tucked away in there, as well as Vector Map Local, and the Land Registry one that I was talking about a moment ago tucked away in here. Basically, if FME doesn't find the schema definition files it needs online to be able to map that GML data, it just uses the local files and allows you to get access to that. Focusing for a moment then on transformers, the look and feel has changed quite a bit. SAFE have introduced a concept called decorations to their transformers. The ones on the top left there are more standard transformers that process data through them from one place to another and carry out an operation. The ones in the bottom right-hand corner have these little adornments or decorations that indicate that they are either generating data like the creator. The creator is building some data and publishing that into the workspace. The feature reader and the conventional reader both get data off disk. So whether it's in a database or in a file, they're coming straight from disk. This Twitter status fetcher, as well as lots of other web service related transformers, have this little web indicator to highlight that a web connection is needed and you're essentially connecting out and there is an external dependency on this process. On the right-hand side, these are transformers are just suggesting that they're pinning some data somewhere, down somewhere. In this case, the logger is putting the content into the log window. The inspector pushes it out to the inspection application. So useful little subtleties that have happened to the style of the interface. Port management is another one that is making a difference to having much more maintainable workspaces. In the old days, so 2013 and prior, version 4 of the geometry filter existed, and it allowed you to consume data and then connect up the geometry types that you're interested in keeping. But if you're reading a format that doesn't have any point cloud data, you still had to have this point cloud port available on the canvas. What they've done now, which is a very sensible move, is that you turn on the ports that you want to define. So now you go into the properties, you tick the box that relates to points, lines, or areas, and if your data doesn't conform to one of those 3 geometry types, then essentially what happens is your data is unfiltered. So it's a much more sensible approach to having a nice, tidy workspace, and that's an addition to FME 2014. That sort of minimalist approach continues on through into the way that your transformers themselves are dealt with. You can see that this transformer here is the 2013 version of the aggregator, and the one on the left is the 2014 version. So essentially, if transformers had an input port, they've been removed if they serve no value. Now the data comes straight into the transformer and content comes out. The reason for that is a little bit of tidying up, really, making your workspaces a little bit more easy to maintain and less cluttered unnecessarily. The same ethos is carried through to the dialog boxes. On the right we have the original aggregators parameter list. On the left, the 2014 approach. So here now the parameters that are important or mandatory to fill in are front and center. of your dialog box. Down below, though, are collapse parameters that you can optionally go and set if they are of interest to you. So much more simple approach, especially as some transformers give a wealth of capability now. So trying to keep only what is important for a user to see front and center in that process. That idea of consistency is being carried through to some of the underlying capabilities around lots of transformers. A capability is around the type of transformer you plant on the canvas. There's a concept called group-based and feature-based transformers. Feature-based transformers are transformers that allow data to pass through them and move on to the next transformer in the workflow and carry out an operation. Here, the area calculator calculates area, releases a feature to have its attributes copied, and then it ends up in the statistics calculator. The statistics calculator is a group-based transformer that has to wait for the last feature in the group to arrive before it can calculate the statistics. So, for example, calculate an average area. As soon as that operation has happened, which will happen in memory, those features can then be released, and they get released in the order in which they arrived out to the target data set. So that suggests that resources, system resources, can become important depending on the type of transformer you use. The clipper transformer is a transformer that has the ability to be turned from group-based to feature-based and back again, depending on how you want to operate. So in single clipper mode, if you have your data ordered on the navigator canvas so that the features that are going to be clipped are read first, they make their way into the clipper transformer, and then they have to sit and wait for the clipping feature to arrive. So all that data is then held in memory, which can sometimes mean that you're using a lot of memory, and your process will be slower than perhaps if you alter the structure or the way that it's designed, your workflow is designed. Just by swapping clippers first mode and setting that on the clipper transformer and moving your reader order, and I'll show you how that can be done in a moment, you can make sure that the thing that's going to do the clipping, which is probably a fewer volume, you don't have many of them, is all that sits in memory. And now in feature-based mode, essentially every feature comes through that process and can be clipped and released out of memory straight away. The point I'm getting to is that several transformers are starting to get this capability. The feature merger is the latest one to get this addition. So if we just close down that exercise from previously and dive into a pre-configured process that includes the feature merger, you can see here that the main thing to identify is that I'm reading some CSV data, which, as before, gets created into points. Then we generate lines, so we have the road features, and we keep only the attributes we need. We join to an access database to get the road classification and the road name using the feature merger. So we've got two different readers being brought in here. The default operation is that suppliers first is set to no, which means this is the new parameter. At the moment, this process, if I run it, gives us some output. The impact is that when we start to work with larger data sets, it can make a real difference. Here we've now got our roads that have been constructed, each of which have got their own information attached to them. If I go into the feature merger and change the suppliers first, without making any change to the way in which the data is read, we'll get no result out the back end of the feature merger. And we get a warning that's very obvious. Suppliers first option is enabled. A new supplier has been detected after the processing of requesters has begun. So we're ignoring all the new suppliers. So in order to handle that, we can just move that data set up in the list. And that means that the access database gets read first. And now we can run that. And with large data sets, the key thing or key place to look is at your peak memory usage. Real bit of performance, bit of a performance tip here. Other transformers that have this option, transformers like the clipper I've already mentioned, using the option clippers first mode allows that to be defined. The aggregator is also similar, input ordered by group, yes or no. allows you to control the way that memory is managed in your processes. So important additions to 2014 on that feature merger front, which is a very heavily used transformer in workflows that I see customers are using. On the database front, there's a new approach been brought in to really save challenges when you're working with databases. Working with databases can get complicated pretty quickly, especially if you're not really a database person. Two transformers have been brought along to try and help you out here, the database updater and deleter. Both allow you to avoid the more involved method of using the FME DB operation attribute that allows you to insert or update or delete individual features into a target database. That operation capability still exists and is still advised, but when you have simple relationships where you want to update columns or content, update rows or content based on a where clause and some IDs, then those two transformers exist to help you do that. On the infrastructure side, attention really is being focused on Workbench and the Data Inspector now. If you've been using FME for a little while, you'll have known that the Universal Viewer was around as the main way of visualizing your data. A couple of years ago, though, the Data Inspector, this application here, came along. It was built largely because it had to be reworked in order to support the third dimension, so you can have a 3D view of your 3D data. But more recently, it's given us things like the table view, and essentially it's becoming and has become formally in this release the de facto data inspection application. Over in your utilities are where you'll find some of the other third-party tools, and that's where the Universal Viewer has now been demoted to. It's still available if you want it, but focus on the Data Inspector now. The other thing that we've noticed that's a really important change to FME 2014 is now that passwords are truly encrypted throughout the application. In the past, the best approach really was to password protect your entire workspace, but that wasn't always practical. So now, if you include a password parameter in your workflow, you can properly secure that from any casual observer to that workspace. On the continue the infrastructure side of things, inspection now in the Data Inspector gives you the ability to have some background mapping included. So if I just open up the 2014 Inspector and bring that across for us to take a look at, we've now got Mapbox and MapQuest included as web services that we can connect to and have access to the data as background mapping, and that's accessible via the tools, FME options. You've got a big long list of additional capabilities now. You can even add your own FME formats. So, for example, if you had a web feature service, a WFS that you wanted to connect to, or perhaps some raster data that you wanted to include by default as your background mapping, you could include that. I'm going to focus on MapQuest briefly because you can see in here you've got an option to have some open aerial data or some OpenStreetMap data included as your backdrop mapping. If I set that, you'll notice that the backdrop map is brought in spherical Mercator. So if you overlay any data on top of this backdrop map, your data will be reprojected to that on the fly. So just be aware of that. That sort of takes some getting used to, and you need to be aware that that's happening. So this isn't always an appropriate thing to be turned on, but it is useful every now and again. If I drag in some of that shape data, which was the Cambridge Inspire data from the land registry, we can bring that into that workflow and take a look at it. And now we've got some OpenStreetMap data from MapQuest, which I'll zoom in on and then let that refresh so you can see that. And we've got a nice bit of background mapping, quite detailed, as that's OpenStreetMap coming in there. The other thing to bear in mind when you bring data into this workflow is that you also need to be aware that when you add data to this workflow, it needs to have a coordinate system for it to work in conjunction with your backdrop mapping. So In this case, I know this data is British National Grid data, so I'll bring that in. These are contours from Ordnance Survey open data, landform panorama, I think it is, for Snowdonia, and I will bring that data in. I'll zoom extents, and you'll see the impact of that in a moment. So let's just pull out a little bit more. There we go. So we can navigate our way over, and you can see that essentially these contours have got a little tilt on them, so it's been reprojected to map to spherical Mercator. If we zoom in a bit more, we'll get to see a little bit of the OpenStreetMap data underneath that workflow. Okay, so moving on a little bit, taking a look at the flexibility that's now capable around infrastructure. Attribute value editing, it's always been I've sometimes referred to it as a bit of a quick and dirty way of getting what you need. But actually when it comes to testing a capability in FME, it can be quite handy. Essentially, you right-click on an attribute either in the creator that you've just created or on your target data, and then you can force a constant value into it. In this case, I'm forcing onespatial.com into every attribute on every feature of URL. So it's not ideal in some scenarios, but sometimes you just need to do that. What has now happened is that approach to using constants has been deprecated. So we've moved towards a more dynamic approach of having these ability to have attributes that are values and can be edited. So if I pull over a approach to that, you'll see what's going on here. Two things become very obvious straight away. So we've actually got an option that we drop down, and we can see that under there we've got an editable attribute now. So in this case, it's set the value here, but the important thing is that we're not just restricted to putting a constant value in there. We could put another attribute in there. We could put in there a concatenated value, a mathematic expression that creates another value. Importantly, we can go and get a parameter. We can deal with conditional values or make it null. So all sorts of options. The same is true on the target format. Exactly the same capability. So it's a neat little addition to this structure. What you'll also notice is that unlike in FME 2013 and prior, if you ever had any attributes that didn't have a populated value, you had to expand down the schema in order to notice that. Here you can see this little arrow is red to indicate that something has gone awry below. Likewise, this one is pink to indicate that we can see that we've got a constructed value. So some really useful interface changes that have happened there to make your life quicker and easier. On the custom transformer front, I have to say that there's a huge amount of change around custom transformers around 2014. I'll highlight some of them, but it's not by no long shot. The actual data is or capabilities are going to be covered in full here. So go and have a look at custom transformers. The FME store, if I start with that, was introduced in 2012. And it's where you can go and get lots of different capabilities like templates to show you how to do things in FME, custom transformers that people have built to carry out specific tasks that aren't available in FME. And there's lots and lots of them available to download. And also custom formats, so lots of resources to go and download. It means that increasingly when you go to documentation or articles on FMEpedia that have things to download, so this is a workflow that shows you how to use and create extruded histograms in Google Earth. There's a custom transformer to build those extruded histograms for you called the KML diagrammer. It means when you download these things that quite often there will be an embedded resource in them. Now the old approach was that the transformers that you hadn't previously downloaded, the FNX files, the custom transformers, would mean that your workspace opened up with a hole in it, and you had to work out what was missing. Again, it's a simple change, and it sort of makes you think why it wasn't done like this in the first place. But you know, these things don't always appear obvious. And what I'm going to do is just close this down, and I'm going to drag into place a workspace that I've downloaded, and you'll have to sort of keep your eyes open really to see what happens. But here's the FMW coming in, dragging onto the canvas now, and you see that we get a progress bar that immediately hits FME server. If you didn't manage to see that refreshing over the webinar, there was a little progress bar there. The important part though is that, look, it's actually downloaded that FMX file with KML diagrammer directly from the FME store, which means that if you've got FMX files that you're using internally within your organization and you've set up a central location for those, or you're using custom transformers from the store and one of your colleagues hasn't yet got it, it doesn't matter. You'll have it straight away in this workflow. Other things that have happened are that if you've got multiple instances of the same embedded custom transformer in your workspace, if you remove the last one, you'll get prompted to delete the definition, which will mean your workspaces are smaller and more efficient and have less extraneous content that isn't required in that process. You can multiple embed instances of custom transformers, many times for multiple instances, and likewise you can link them. So custom transformers are a way that you can build a series of transformers and embed them into your workflow, and they do a certain job, and you might want to reuse that job in multiple places in that workflow. One Spatial have built a number of transformers that exist on the FME store, so you can go ahead and download those and use them if you'd like to, the message logger, the UK postcode validator, and the % overlap transformer. Handy little tools to go and get access to. This is a cluster modeler transformer available on the FME store. If you were to download it, I would say that one of the biggest changes that's happened around custom transformers is that you can now manage the attributes that are exposed to the insides of that custom transformer and what leave that transformer, using a right-click on the input and a right-click on the output to pop up these dialogues and manage what attributes are there. This is, and custom transformers are, a little bit of an advanced capability, so I'm not suggesting that they're something that everybody will use, but once you get into custom transformers, they're extremely powerful in the capabilities that they offer. Versioning is now supported in custom transformers as well, so you can make sure that you properly assign versioning to your processes. Coming to the end then, really, but finishing up with how the documentation has changed within FME and how that makes a real difference to the way that you pass your workflows to colleagues and externally out of your organization. You can now add a huge amount of extra annotation to your workflows. So we can see that you can add lots of different annotations, but more importantly, you can change the color and style of those. You can start to embed hyperlinks and also put tabular content into these workflows and add bullets. None of this was possible before in terms of styling. Certainly you could annotate things, but your capability was a little bit more limited in how you could style that content up. And I have to say, it makes a vast difference to the ability to document production workspaces so that casual observers or users who are coming to maintain these processes can come in and immediately understand exactly what's going on in the workflow with plain English descriptions about what's going on in each step of the process. So Canvas annotations really have made a significant difference to being able to properly document your workspaces. When it comes to documentation as well, workspace properties are something that have been around for a good while. Metadata about your workspace. This becomes really important when you start publishing processes to FME server, because this metadata is available to you in the FME server interface as long as you fill it in. But it's also available to other users when you pass processes across to them. It's been around for a while, but now you can style these up as well, so you can have much more controllable documentation to add bullets and hyperlinks and different size text and color. It sounds like a real odd thing to be making such a big deal about, but these styling capabilities do offer a lot of flexibility around documentation, and it's something that often people, myself included, are very bad at remembering to do, but there's no excuse now. Document your production processes and make the workflows simpler to understand and read. Perhaps don't use Latin like I have here, though, because that sort of will be a bit of a backward step on that front. On the documentation front as well, big change on the help, consolidating the help for all Canvas items. So in 2013, you had transformer descriptions. You click a transformer, you get to see the help immediately in the transformer description window. That is now generically called the help window, which means that if you were to click on a reader feature type or a writer feature type, you will see the help for that directly from the FME Readers and Writers Reference Manual. So no longer do you have to dive out to other documentation when you're working with a format that is new to you and you need to find out what the subtleties are of that format. It's available right there when you need it. So big change to how you can see that content. So I've rattled through a lot of capabilities that have turned up in FME 2014 and some that turned up in 2013 service packs as well. So I've bent the rules a little bit, but hopefully you'll forgive me. Those were just a few of our favourite things. There are lots of resources for you to go and have a look at, but those things are already making a difference to us in our daily FME lives. Resources that I'd like to point you towards, obviously go and look at SAFE's website at safe.com. Come and look at ours at onespatial.com. But do go to FMEpedia. FMEpedia is a mine of information now. The knowledge base contains thousands of articles that allows you to research and download content and templates and custom utilities. Community answers site, even if you don't register to contribute to it, go and see what people are talking about. People are registered with that site. There's lots of people that offer answers to your questions, and do go and look at SAFE's blog. Go onto YouTube, check out the One Spatial group channel. Go and have a look at the FME channel that are available there, and interact with us on Twitter via @OneSpatial and @Safe Software. If you want to come on the FME World Tour, we definitely encourage you to do that. One Spatial are running 5 legs of the World Tour. It's not just in the UK and Australia, it's going around the globe with Safe Software attending those events, and in this case we're going to Bristol, London, Leeds, Edinburgh, and if you fancy a suntan you can go to Melbourne as well in Australia. But those events are all running through April and May. Please go and register for those events at our website, FME-World-Tour is the suffix on our web address there. That's really about it. You've got some ways of getting in touch with us. We've also got more webinars in this series coming up. onespatial.com/events is where you can register for those. We'll hang on the line for any questions that are coming in. I've seen a couple come in during this session. You're welcome to tap those into the chat window. I can see a couple that have turned up, so I'll have a go at answering those now. It looks like I've seen one there. It says, which transformer allows you to merge adjacent polygons together? Well, as long as they are with coterminous boundaries, you can use the dissolver transformer for that. The dissolver allows you to group by as well, so you can group them based on particular identifiers if you want to. I'd also go and have a look at the aggregator. So that's sometimes used in conjunction with the dissolver. I can see there's another question in there. That's around 64-bit platform. So it says, is the 64-bit Windows installer still available? So the answer to that simply is yes. FME Desktop is supported on, has a 32-bit installer and a 64-bit installer. As I mentioned, there's also a Linux 64 installer and a Mac OS X installer as well. Do go and look at safe.com/formats though and sort by platform, because there is a health warning still around 64-bit and Mac and Linux platforms. Some formats are not available on those platforms. So the 32-bit installer is always the default best bet, but if there's a specific reason, then move to one of the others if you need to. So that looks like all the questions that came in over the chat. So we'll hang around online. You're more than welcome to send us any questions you might have via FME@onespatial.com or directly to myself, david.eagle@onespatial.com. But for now, thank you very much, and goodbye, and we hope to see you again on one of these sessions in the future.